Hey, this is Father Bill W. here in Austin, Texas, and want to welcome you to the podcast. I'm an Episcopal priest in long-term recovery, have been working at this thing going on 48 years, and very grateful to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which really changed my life and introduced me to a whole different way of living. I had another change. You stick around this thing long enough, and I think you'll have more than one awakening. And I had one about 20 years sober was when I really got introduced to the history of AA. I was struggling. Um, I had lost the juice, let us say, and needed to go deeper in my own recovery process. And that's when I got in touch with the history and some of the things that were at work in some of the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it totally changed my perspective on the program. And the thing that probably changed it more than any was a practice that they called two-way prayer that is really embedded in our 11th step. And yet the practice got lost along the way. I'd encourage you to visit our website. It's by that same name, Two-Way Prayer, and check it out if you haven't done so already. And we'd love to hear from you. You can drop me a line at twowayprayer@gmail.com. Love to hear your responses and reactions to that process. We're doing a series now on Carl Jung and AA. And we began that series with kind of an in-depth look at Rowland Hazard and the key role that he played in the beginnings of the program. He was a wealthy alcoholic, been in treatment many, many times, always failing. And finally, he was sent over to Switzerland and placed under the care of Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychiatrist. His story is, of course, told in the big book, and he's not mentioned by name, but we get to hear what was going on in the conversation, the critical conversation that happened between Jung and Rowland, because he told him that his only hope for transformation, for change, for sobriety, his only hope was in finding what he called a psychic change, a conversion experience, a change at the very deepest levels of the self. And Rowland was, I believe, really fortunate to have a man like Jung for his therapist, a man who knew where it was that alcoholics like Rowland would have to go if they were going to really find recovery for the illness that really lays at the heart. And he sees it as a spiritual illness, a disconnection. Very, very fortunate to have that. So what he said to Rowland is you're going to have to go inside. You're going to have to go down to the deepest levels of your soul and there connect or reconnect to the source of life. See, Jung believed that in many cases of addiction, that's what the problem was, that we were disconnected from our source. And because of that, we were chronically unhappy and chronically seeking in places where we would never find it, that joy, that reconnection, that spark, that energy that was missing from us. And that's the spiritual that Jung was in touch with and that he wanted his patients to get in touch with. So that it's a journey that he sent them on. We don't know exactly where he sent him. He just said, this is most likely to happen in a religious environment. So basically go there, pray for a miracle, see if this reconnection can't happen. It's the same journey that we read at most AA meetings in that part of the 5th chapter. Hey, we were alcoholics, could not manage our own lives. No human power could have relieved us of our alcoholism, but God could and would if he were sought. So Rowland is sent in search of. And that is, I think, where we always begin the recovery process, in search of God. And man and God have been sort of searching for one another uh, ever since the world began. You might say it really goes to the heart of what this world is about. Am I connected or am I not connected? So God's always been, in quote, a problem. And I think more of a problem today, even than it was back in the 1930s. There was a recent survey done that 70% of older Americans said they value the role of religion, value its place in their lives, and their belief in God is really important to him. That same study reported only 30% of young Americans feel the same. I don't like to be negative, but our churches are in decline. We know that. Hey, attendance at church is down. Life in the church is oftentimes non-existent. Religion has largely failed us in the role that it has traditionally played in connecting us to that great reality, the reality that is both within and beyond. And Carl Jung knew that. He had studied a lot of philosophy. He had studied Nietzsche. He was one of his teachers, and Jung knew the important place that religion had always played, and that it was no longer playing. So there's a famous interview that he did with the BBC in 1959, where he was asked about some of his religious upbringing and where he was in his own spiritual journey. So I'd like to play that for us now, and we'll listen to Carl Jung being interviewed by the BBC.
What sort of religious upbringing did your father give you?
Oh, we were Swiss Reformed.
And did he make you attend church regularly?
Oh, well, that was quite natural.
Yes.
Everybody went to church on
Yes.
Sunday.
And did you believe in God?
Oh, yes.
Do you now believe in God?
Now, difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
I just love that line from Jung. I know that it's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of experience. And that was where Jung had gone to in his own realization of the importance of religion, that it had to be an experience. There was that controversy that they changed the one part of the steps. Having had a spiritual experience got changed to an awakening, and we always say, "Wasn't that wonderful?" So it gives people lots of room to grow and change, and not hit them with something too heavy right off the bat. But Wilson wanted to change it back because he liked the word experience, and so did a number of other people who were really students of the Oxford group and the AA movement in its earliest days. And one guy said he wept when they changed that to awakening. So an experience is something that is internal, and it changes you. It has that effect. Wilson wanted to change it back, and they wouldn't let him. So I always thought that was pretty fascinating. So here's Jung in a very important statement, and he's talking about his relationship with religion. And he says this: I have treated many hundreds of patients. Among those in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. It is safe to say that every one of them fell ill because he had lost that which the living religions of every age have given their followers, and none of them has really been healed who did not regain his religious outlook. Whoa, I've probably read that one 100 times, and it's really important. Jung was a scientist. He wasn't out to teach theology, but he was convinced that religions played a tremendously important role in the life of men, and that it was being lost, and that had to be regained. That connection had to be regained. Uh, because what? There's a libido, there's a life force that is at work there. There's 100,000 volts of energy that we then connect with, and it gives meaning and purpose and direction to our lives. And if we don't have that, we suffer, and we drink and we drug and we buy things, and we become militant atheists and communists and Nazis, and we look for it in all sorts of isms, which can never really fulfill that internal need men and women have for a connection with their source. So Jung was critically aware of that. He knew there was something missing from modern life, and missing from the religions of his day. His father, he said, was a pastor, but his father was also part of a church that was dead, and he watched and he saw what religion, what dead religion did to members of his family. And he was seeking for something that was alive, something that was alive and creative and at work. And that comes through an experience. Wrote a book called Modern Man in Search of a Soul. Read that real early in my recovery. It was an important book for me. Because, boy, I knew I was in search of a soul. I had lost contact with it, if I had ever even gained contact in the beginning. And I think that's pretty much the condition most of us arrive in when we come to the program. There's a Jungian analyst by the name of John Sanford, and he wrote something I think was helpful. He said, he's talking about the soul, and Jung said he believes in souls. He believes deeply in souls, and many people really do not. Here's what Sanford wrote about that. He said, without the living connection to ourselves that the soul makes possible, we are like a ship without a rudder, or like an uprooted tree. Such a person becomes ill or brutal, or falls into despair, or seeks substitutes in alcohol and drugs. Man, welcome to America 2020. We are searching for God in all the wrong directions. Now, Jung was a scientist, and he was not a theologian. But as a psychologist, you see, what a psychologist is, psyche means soul. Psychology is the study of the soul. It really ought to be where priests and theologians are going, but most of us have been co-opted by our culture, But he was not. He knew that there was something there, and he knew that helping people find that connection and helping himself to find that connection was going to make all of the difference in his life. In his writings, he wasn't really appealing for blind faith in outdated religious doctrines and dogmas, but he was desperately trying to remind the world that we would pay a huge price for this disconnection with our own souls. Today, I think that's where the majority of us are. Here's another thing that I've probably read 100 times that Jung wrote, because it's just beautiful, and I want to take it apart and analyze it a bit. He said this: I am not addressing myself to the happy possessors of faith, but to those many people for whom the light has gone out, the mystery has faded, and God is dead. For most of them, there is no going back, and one does not know either whether going back is the better way. To gain an understanding of religious matters, probably all that is left us today is the psychological approach. That is why I take these thought forms that have become historically fixed, try to melt them down again, and pour them into molds of immediate experience. It's a kind of a heavy paragraph there, but man, is it loaded. And it's worth taking a few minutes to tease it out and pull it apart. So what he says in the beginning, I'm not addressing myself to those people who have faith. If you've got faith, Jung said he said one of his patients, if you're a member of the Oxford group, you go and get fixed in the Oxford group. I can't do it better than Jesus, but take it seriously. Do it seriously. Can religion change a person? Well, William James said it could. Real in-depth religion. In Varieties of Religious Experience, he's got the stories of a couple of alcoholics in there who changed. William Hadley changed, found God, and found recovery, and never drank again. It is possible, but it's also rare, and many people can substitute an addiction to religion instead of really finding the wholeness that Jung wanted them to have. So again, he's not writing to those people. If you got it, great. But for those who've lost it, or maybe never found it, that's who I'm writing to. And he says, for most of them, there is no going back. He's not recommending that you go back and you get right with your religion. No, he's not saying that. Because he doesn't know that that's actually the better way. Because if that religion is dead, then going back and reconnecting with it is not going to be very helpful to you. But to gain an understanding of religious matters, because you see there's something that happens in religion, and he was convinced people needed to know that. Probably all that is left is the psychological approach. And that is why, and this is where it gets a little heavy. That is why I take these thought forms that have become historically fixed. The thought forms that have become historically fixed. The Bible, Scripture, the stories that are told there. These are really important stories that have been handed down. They're historically fixed, all right? And so he wants to go back and revisit those, not from a theological perspective, but from a psychological perspective. What does it mean to die and be born again? Does it mean you become a Republican? I don't think so. I think it means you really change at a very, very deep level, and you are not the same individual that you were. So take these thought forms that have become historically fixed. See, Jung said, don't throw out religion. If we throw out religion, it's going to take us 500 years to ever crawl back from that. That there are things that are dealt with in religion that we need to look at, but look at anew, look at through different eyes, okay? Melt them down. What does the resurrection mean? What is the meaning of that? No, don't argue about did it happen or did it not happen. Feel it and feel what it's like to be dead and then to come back to life. And that's something that alcoholics and addicts can wrap their minds around, Feel what it's like to be Lazarus laying in the tomb. Feel what it's like to be the children of Israel enslaved in Egypt. Feel what it's like to hear the promises, like God promised Abraham. All right, that he didn't have any children. His wife was 90 something years old. Things were not looking good, kid wise. and he says, "You're going to have more children. You're going to have more children than all the stars in the sky." See? Now, when you're first hearing the promises read at an AA meeting, you're kind of feeling like that. Oh, come on. Is this really going to happen to me? Well, yes. If you can take Abraham and see the Abraham in you. All right. Here's a quote from Jung I stumbled on. He said, "We must read the Bible, or we shall not understand psychology. Our psychology, whole lives, our language and imagery are built upon the Bible." Boy, we must read the Bible, or we shall not understand psychology. Our psychology, whole lives, our language and imagery are built upon the Bible. Some people, a lot of people will practice Buddhism. There's a lot of people, I know a lot of people in AA, hey, angry as hell at the church. I was probably one of them. I was raised in the church, angry with it. And I had to go back and deal with that. I could run off and become a Hindu or I had delusions of that kind of thing, but that's not who I am. Just like a Hindu, I don't think you can run off and become a Christian. It's not a matter of what you believe. It's a matter of dealing inside with the stuff that's going on. And deep inside, when we're raised in this thing and generation after generation of this thing, it's like it's in our DNA. I can no more not be a Christian than I could not be Irish. It's embedded in my genes. But I have to deal with that. I have to deal with the Irish part by not drinking. So anyway, Jung had an interesting definition of religion, and there are two definitions. His is less popular. The more popular one is that it means to rebind, to go back and reconnect us, ligaments, rejoining. Hey, but the other definition is older. Jung said. And it goes like this. He said, religion means a watchful, wary, thoughtful, careful, prudent, expedient, and calculated attitude towards the powers that be. Be on guard, in other words. See what it is that's going on in your life. Where? Inside. Where? The unconscious. See, that's where we get drunk again. That's where the change has to happen. When Rowland was sent for his spiritual transformation, his psychic change, Jung was saying, in effect, I haven't been able to reach the depth of your unconscious. And that's where the change has to happen. That's where your reconnecting to God has to happen. All right. So that's the journey. And it hurts me. And hell, I did it for 20 years. For 20 years, I put my religious upbringing to one side and just said, well, I'm going to do the AA thing. God, if there is a God, help me and not pay much attention to who God is or how he's been speaking for 5,000 years until that didn't work anymore. So when I did go pick it up, I was really grateful. I had some good teachers, and Jung was one of them. Not personally, but the people who went on the journey that he recommended. And so I came away from that with a different appreciation of the Bible and the great stories that are there that I had had not allowed myself to enter into and to listen to. See, these stories have been there for thousands of years, and they're teaching us. It's not, are they true or are they not true? They're more than true. They're more than true. That's the key point that people have got to understand. And what are they there to answer? Why are we here? How do we hold our lives and our world together? How do we hold this in unity? How do we relate to God and to one another? Some people, look at the Bible as fact. Every word is true. Well, I can't go that route. Could not do that. The Bible is a story. It's the story of thousands of years of people's relationship with that mysterious thing, person, entity inside to whom we all have to relate. All right. That's one way of doing it is become a fundamentalist. It doesn't work for me. Other people dismiss it and they say, well, these are just stories. Well, just stories. Think about that. See, they're not meant to be historically accurate. They're faith stories. And what they're meant to do is to speak to that speak about that which is unspeakable. So Jung was into contradictions and paradoxes, and when you get these paradoxes coming together and clashing, then you create a new consciousness. So how to read the Bible psychologically, as myth, as God speaking to me now. That's the way to read the Bible. So that it can open up the soul. It touches the soul, and connects the soul to that which is beyond. Story of creation. How many arguments have you had? Did God make the world in 6 days? That's nonsense, and it's not what the story's about. What the story's about is every time something happens, he says, and it was good. He made this and it was good, and it was good, and he made you and you were very good. Now that's something to pray and think about in the scripture. And that's the meaning really of the story. Richard Rohr said he got so depressed some years back, and he was reading Genesis, the story of creation. And he said just those words kept him alive. It's good. May not look good, may not feel good. You may want to kill yourself right now, but it's good. Hang on to that. Hang on to that. Let's see. 3 sections of the Bible. I want to talk about this for just a second. Bible scholars talk about the Bible being in 3 different sections, three parts. The first part is the law. All right, and this is do this and don't do that. Do this and don't do that. All right, it's kind of like spiritual boot camp. Boot camp is necessary, and it's really helpful. If you're in the Army, how do you feel? You guys want to go for a run today? Would you like to put 50 pounds on your back and go run for 5 miles? Would you like to do that? No. You get up and you do it. It's the law. And the law is necessary and it's helpful, all right? But it's good for just so much, And then comes the second part of the Bible, which is the prophets. The law says this, but God says this. God says that. And it's taking the law and going beyond the law. How are you treating the poor? How are you treating the alien? How are you distributing wealth amongst you? It's a question that I think we're asking right now with all of the demonstrations that are going on. How much longer can we put down blacks and browns and get away with it. You can't. There's a reckoning that comes. The prophets. Martin Luther King, a prophet. Jesus, a prophet, saying, wake up, watch. And then comes the third part of the scripture, and that is called the wisdom literature. And there's the third coming out of the two. You got the law, you got the prophets. Now you put those two seemingly paradoxical things together, and you arrive at wisdom. And Jung said the greatest book of wisdom was the book of Job. The book of Job, where a human being speaks to God. Up until then, it was always about the nation, but now it's one person, one-on-one with God, and they duke it out. They really do duke it out. As a psychological study, there's nothing better than the book of Job. And Jung wrote a book, very important book, called The Answer to Job. And what he said in that, it's often lost, is the answer to Job was Jesus Christ. That the answer to Job and his complaints about the human condition, and anyone out there who's suffered, we've all suffered, and a lot of you have suffered more than I've ever suffered, and you say, how can I go on? And God's response to Job, who suffered, was to become the suffering servant, to become the Christ, the liberator, not in the way the Jewish people were expecting to find one, but the suffering servant who is with them in their problems, in their trials. So these stories are tremendously important. They need to become our stories. If I could sum this thing up in a word, that would be it. That you can take the stories that are in sacred scripture and make them your own stories, so that you can live them out and find connection and faith and hope through that. And I think Jung may be the key for our going forward with that. In high school, you probably had studied this poem by T.S. Eliot, but it's really the summation of what I'm saying here. He says, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Know the place for the first time. So I hope you'll pay a little attention to Jung. He's not asking you to join this church or that church. He's asking you what is the message of religion and spirituality that we need to connect with if we are going to find our lives and pass on to our children that which they so desperately need. So hope this was helpful to you. Love to hear some response from you. We will do one more thing on Jung next time, and then we're going to move on to something else. So thanks for listening. God bless, and keep coming back.